The morning air carried that strange mix of excitement and dread that always clings to the start of a new school year. The yellow bus pulled up to the curb with a loud hiss, its doors creaking open, and for most of the kids who climbed on, it was just another ride, another ordinary day. But for Emily, it was anything but ordinary. She was the new girl, 14 years old, quiet and carrying the weight of too many changes on her small shoulders. Her family had just moved to town after her parents' messy divorce, and she hadn't had the chance to find her footing yet. She clutched her backpack as though it was her shield, stepping into the aisle with hesitant feet, her eyes darting quickly across the crowded rows of kids who all seemed to know each other, who all seemed to belong in a way she didn't. She chose a seat halfway down, sliding in quickly and pressing herself close to the window as though the glass could protect her from the stairs. The hum of chatter filled the bus, but none of it belonged to her. She sat alone, wishing she could vanish into the noise. But sitting just a few rows behind her were two boys who had already noticed. Kyle and Brent, both a year older, carried themselves with the kind of arrogance only teenage boys can perfect. They weren't the smartest or the strongest in school, but they knew how to find weakness, and they knew how to make others laugh at someone else's expense. When they spotted Emily, shy and unfamiliar, she might as well have had a target painted on her back. They started whispering at first, their voices sharp with mockery. "Look at her," Brent muttered, elbowing Kyle. "She looks like she's about to cry already." Kyle grinned, leaning into the aisle so his words carried. "Hey, new girl, you forget how to talk, or are you just too good for the rest of us?" A few kids chuckled nervously, but most turned their faces away, pretending not to hear. No one wanted to be dragged into it. Emily's grip on her backpack tightened, her eyes fixed on the floor, heart thudding painfully in her chest. She didn't answer. She had learned in her old school that answering bullies often made it worse. Silence, she thought, was safer. But silence only encouraged them. Brent reached forward suddenly, tugging at the strap of her bag. "What's in here?" he sneered. "Homework? Or bricks to throw at people?" He laughed at his own joke, loud and mean, and the sound made Emily's stomach twist. She wanted to disappear, but disappearing wasn't an option. Not here, not now. At the very front of the bus, just behind the driver, sat a man most kids barely noticed. His name was Daniel. A single father in his late 30s, Daniel wasn't a teacher, wasn't school staff, wasn't anyone in authority. He was simply there for his 7-year-old son, Liam, who was too anxious to ride the bus alone. Daniel had made it his routine, every morning, despite working long night shifts at the mechanic's shop, to climb aboard with Liam and make sure he felt safe until the bus dropped him at school. He sat quietly most mornings, eyes heavy with exhaustion, but there was a steadiness about him, a kind of presence that filled the space without demanding attention. He wasn't loud, he wasn't imposing, but he noticed things. And that morning, he noticed Emily. He noticed her shaking hands. He noticed the way the boys tugged at her bag and sneered. He noticed the silence of everyone else, the silence that screamed of fear. Something in him stirred, something deeper than frustration. Maybe it was because he knew what it felt like to be pushed down. Maybe it was because he had promised himself, after losing his wife and raising Liam alone, that he would never let his son grow up thinking cruelty was strength. Slowly, Daniel rose from his seat. The weight of his footsteps echoed on the bus floor as he walked down the aisle. The laughter behind Emily faltered as the boys looked up to see a tall man looming over them, his face calm but his eyes steady as stone. The chatter in the bus died instantly. Even the driver glanced nervously in the mirror. Daniel didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice, when it came, was low and controlled. "That's enough." The two boys stiffened, trying to mask their unease with smirks. Kyle shrugged. "We're just joking, man." His tone was casual, but his eyes flickered nervously. Daniel crouched slightly so he was eye level with them. His gaze was firm, not angry, but carrying a weight that couldn't be ignored. "Joking is when everyone laughs," he said evenly. "Do you see her laughing?" He tilted his head slightly toward Emily, whose wide eyes glistened with unshaded tears. The boys looked away. For the first time, their bravado cracked. Brent muttered something under his breath, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Daniel stood tall again, addressing not just the boys but the entire bus. "Every one of you has a choice. You can tear each other down or you can build each other up. One choice makes you small, the other makes you strong, and I promise you, the one you choose will stay with you for the rest of your life." The words hung heavy in the air, not shouted but sinking deep. The kids shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the engine. Emily sat frozen, unsure what to do, but when Daniel turned to her, his voice softened. "You okay?" She nodded quickly, though the tears finally spilled, rolling silently down her cheeks. He gave her a small, reassuring nod, then returned to his seat. He didn't need to say more. The moment had already shifted something in the atmosphere of that bus. For the rest of the ride, Kyle and Brent stayed quiet. The other kids whispered among themselves, sneaking glances at Emily, but no one dared laugh. For the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, someone had seen her. Someone had cared enough to stand, and in that small moment, a seed of hope was planted. But of course, life doesn't change in a single day. Over the next few weeks, Emily still struggled. School was overwhelming. Making friends was harder than she'd ever imagined. Her mother worked double shifts at the diner, rarely home before midnight, leaving Emily to eat dinner alone most nights. The loneliness was crushing. And though Kyle and Brent had been quieter on the bus, they weren't done. They mocked her in the hallways, snickered when she answered questions in class, found ways to make her feel like she didn't belong. It hurt, more than she wanted to admit. Yet every morning, when she climbed onto the bus, there was Daniel, sitting with Liam. Sometimes he'd smile at her, sometimes just give her a nod. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind her she wasn't invisible. That mattered. The true turning point came one rainy afternoon after school. Emily was at her locker, tucking away her books, when Kyle and Brent cornered her. Their laughter was sharper this time, their words crueler. "What's wrong, new girl? Don't have any friends to walk you home. Maybe you should just go back where you came from." Her chest tightened, her throat burned, but before she could even react, a small voice called out across the hallway. "Emily!" It was Lam, clutching a crumpled drawing he had made in class. He ran up to her, grinning proudly, holding it out for her to see. "I drew this for you," he said, his innocent joy cutting straight through the cruelty of the moment. The boys laughed again, mocking the little kid, but their laughter died the instant Daniel appeared behind him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply stood there, one hand resting gently on Liam's shoulder, his eyes steady on the boys. And in that silence, in that calm presence, Kyle and Brent faltered. They shifted uneasily, muttered excuses and walked away. It was in that moment Emily realized something important. Strength wasn't about fists or shouting. Strength was about presence, about refusing to let cruelty rule, about standing in the quiet but unshakable way that Daniel did. That moment didn't just protect her. It gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time: courage. Months passed. Emily began to find her place. She made friends, slowly but surely. She learned to hold her head a little higher. And one day, when she saw another student being picked on, something inside her refused to stay silent. She stepped in, her voice firm. "Leave them alone." She surprised even herself. The bullies sneered, but just like she had once felt, the kid being mocked looked at her with relief and gratitude. The cycle was breaking. By the end of the year, Emily wasn't the quiet, trembling girl who sat pressed against the bus window anymore. She was stronger, braver, and more hopeful. And she knew exactly who had lit that spark inside her. It was a single dad on a school bus who chose to stand up when no one else would. Two closing message zigu for narration sometimes. All it takes is one person to remind us what kindness looks like. Daniel wasn't a teacher. He wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. He was just a father who refused to let cruelty win, and that decision changed Emily's life forever. Remember, your presence, your kindness, your courage might be the very thing someone else needs to find their strength. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Share your own experiences, spread kindness with your words, and help us keep building a community that uplifts instead of tears down. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story here on Be Kind Always. Because in the end, kindness isn't weakness, it's the strongest thing we have.